Good morning and welcome. Thank you again, everybody. It's great to have you with us for another week. We had the face-to-face session here in Sydney last week, and we had some great questions. So hopefully today you'll be able to follow through and help us with some questions as well. We love answering those for you. So today's session is all about looking at different ways to help increase your marketing qualified leads. And so we'll explore a few options and look at some ways to help you do that. For those of you that joined a little earlier, hopefully you noticed some of the other languages we have on the welcome screen. We did use Google Translator to help us, so I hope that was correct. If it was incorrect, please let us know. Let's have a look at the agenda and walk you through what we're going to look at today. So essentially 4 key points for today's session. First of all, trying to identify those people within the database that you're not really engaging with or talking to at the moment. And so we'll look at some easy ways to be able to identify that. Second step is to look at, the sales team are demanding better qualified leads. And so looking at ways that we can help deliver that, essentially. We also need to look at a plan to engage cold or retired leads from the CRM, and so we can explore those for you and show you how segments can help you do that, or perhaps it's a manual extract from the CRM system or from your other databases, but we'll show you how you can do that using segments. And then the last point is looking at taking advantage of more automation to help you with the lead process versus doing individual emails out to that group, looking at setting up processes where you can have people flow through the campaign versus simply sending one email this week and another email next week, etc. So taking a step back and looking at a slightly bigger picture in that context. So our first point is, first of all, trying to understand those people that we're not really talking to, those audiences, members of our database. So if we take the analogy that your list of Eloqua contacts is a barrel, and that barrel is full of contacts, and it could be, as we've said here, 125,000 contacts. It might be as little as 20,000 contacts, or it could be in excess of 1 million contacts. But regardless of the size of your database, there will always be a group of people sitting in the database that you're not really engaging with. And so what we want to do today is give you some tips and ideas on how to identify those people. And there are several ways you can do it. You can analyze their contact activity. That's obviously an easy one to do using segments. But of course, the more obvious one is probably looking at lead scoring and understanding the impact of lead scoring. So if we take the construct of the profile side of your lead score, and we sort of slice that barrel into A, B, C, and D, which are the profile rankings within the lead score model, you can see that we might have a very few people sitting at the very top of the highly qualified area of A, through to a much larger group at the bottom of the screen. And so with these folks down here, for instance, you might find that there's lots of them, and and what we're trying to identify is who we're not engaging with. So whether it's all the way down here in D or wherever it may be, we can certainly have a look at that and identify exactly who those people are. So the other side of the coin is then looking at engagement. So profile is one side. The other side, of course, of your lead score model is understanding engagement. And so the spread here might be quite different. So we might have a larger group in the center, roundabouts, who represent the bulk of your contacts, etc. But you might have a much slimmer group here at the top of the screen, for instance. But again, it's down here at the bottom that we're really trying to focus on and understand what we can do to make them more engaged, and obviously trying to identify that there are leads. So we're not trying. So the task here is specifically, as we say here, is to uncover those contacts that we're not talking to. So how do we do that? Well, quite easily. Actually, it's not that hard. If we look at the bottom of the barrel in this sort of scenario, as I've said here, there will be a group of people that sit in that bottom that you're just not communicating to. Now, how do you identify who those people are? One of the easiest ways to do it is to probably use the segmentation tool within Eloqua. So within segments, one of the really easy ways you could do it is to use this filter criteria, which is, excuse me, not sent any emails. And you're able to define there also a certain period. So in this case, we've said contacts who have not been sent any email within the last 6 months. And so that immediately gives you a result or a number that you can see over here on the top left-hand side. Now, depending on the cycle of the way that you communicate, that time frame may not be relevant. So, of course, you may want to be flexible with that. It could be 12 months. It could be whatever. It could be 9, 10 months, whatever the case may be. But just play around with that filter. If you keep resaving the segment, you'll find that it becomes quite simple to do. I'm just curious, maybe we can use the chat function here to ask a couple of questions. But is there anybody out there running engagement campaigns at the moment, also re-engagement campaigns at the moment? So does anybody, just a simple yes if you do would be great. Do you have specific campaigns that you're running that are identifying those people who are not really engaging with you? So maybe they've been so in the past, maybe they were past customers, they've maybe moved on and they're talking to somebody else, etc. So I see a couple of responses there. No, not yes. No. Okay. So second question then would be, is it on the radar? Is it a part of the database that somebody's thinking about and you see potential there in relation to uncovering some leads potentially for the team? Okay, so now we have yeses, yeses, yeses. Okay, I suppose that's part of the reason why you're here on the session with us today, so thank you. All right, so just to go back, the first step is to identify that audience, to understand who they are, and this is honestly probably one of the easiest ways to do it. Now, there are obviously other ways that people can engage with you, and it's not just about emails. The point with this particular criteria is that we wanted to try and identify those people that you're not engaging with. So they may be visiting your website, and they may be visiting social properties and those sorts of things. But what we're specifically trying to uncover is that group of people within the database that you're not proactively communicating with from an outbound point of view. And so this would be the easiest way for you to identify exactly who that group is. Now, I would find, personally, the easiest way to do this is once you identify that group and the number, is to then either continue doing some segmentation within Eloqua to split that group maybe into customers, into prospects, depending on the size of the database or the size of that particular segment. You may want to break it into industry. You could look at past campaign engagement, etc. Or sometimes it's just a matter of literally spitting it out into Excel and just having a look at who it is, looking at the company names, looking at the names of the individuals, etc. Trying to also determine potentially who, you'll notice at the top of that segment I have another filter criteria there, which is we wanted to make sure that we removed from that final number any people who are globally unsubscribed or who are hard bounce backs. So the number that you see there, the 3958, that is a number of people that we can actually communicate with. So they're not unsubscribed, they're not hard bouncers, they're literally just sitting there in the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. So just play around with that. It's a very simple segment to create. You'll be done in a few minutes, and then you can start to actually analyze and take a closer look at who's sitting in that particular list. So let me show you. We'll have a quick look in Eloqua and have a look at exactly how to build that. As I said, it's really quite simple. It's not complicated. So let's have a close look. So funnily enough, I have a segment called bottom of the barrel, which just makes life a bit easier. Okay. So the first thing I've done is an exclusion. You can see here on the left-hand side of the screen. Zoom in a little bit. That might make it a bit easier for you. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is exclude any hard bounce backs. Now, of course, you can achieve that from over here on the right-hand side. If you just type in the word hard, you'll see here marked as a hard bounce back. So you can drag that in. The other one that we want to exclude is people who are globally unsubscribed. So again, you can't talk to these people anyway. So let's remove them from the number because it'll just inflate the number, and that's the last thing you really need to do. And so very simply what we've done here then is using the email activity criteria over here on the right-hand side of the screen. You'll see there's a whole bunch of options, obviously, that you can choose from. What we chose was the negatives, so not send any emails. Now, depending on any automated programs that you might have in place, you might have system-generated, well, not system-generated emails, but emails that are sent out automatically. So you may want to also look at potentially those who have been sent something but have not opened anything. Okay, so in that case, you could say, if I remove that filter, you could say sent any email, but not opened any email. Right, not opened. So again, just apply probably say at least. Exactly is always a bit harsh. So at least one, and let's say we'll use that same time period within the last 6 months, and has not opened anything within the last 6 months. Now, personally, I'm hoping this is a fairly minimal group, but let's have a look. So we'll save that, and it'll do some counting for us. So these are contacts who have been sent any email within the last 6 months, and contacts who have not opened any of those emails. And so there's a chunk of people sitting in there. So these people are a little bit different because these are the ones that you have actually actively outbound communicated with, but they've not engaged with you. So again, that's a slightly different number to the group who have not been sent any email within the last 6 months. So you can see there's a few ways you can apply a range of different types of filters to try and get a bit of an idea as to those who are completely not engaged, or perhaps those who are less engaged. Okay, we have a hand up. Here we go. Can you use a report from Salesforce? Sure. So the question is, can you use a report from Salesforce as in an email list? Yeah, absolutely. So what you may want to do there is balance because of course, looking at Eloqua data is just one part of your communication process. It's not everything. It's just one part of that process. So you can, depending on the type of report that you want to pull from Salesforce, it may also be about contacts who have not had any activities put against them within Salesforce, for instance. So if nobody's been logging a call, et cetera, it may be that there's no marketing communications going to the person, but it also may be that there's been no company, like person-to-person contact with a particular individual. So you could do that and certainly either extract that information from Salesforce and upload it, or if that information is available through the integration between the two platforms, you would also be able to access that information directly from within Eloqua as well. So the answer is definitely yes, you can certainly do that. Let's move on to the next section of our agenda, which is the blessed sales team are always demanding better qualified leads. And that's okay, because so are we, right? We're always looking to generate better quality leads and more qualified leads. So let's have a closer look. I know that certainly there is plenty of discussion in relation to what makes a qualified lead, and certainly one of the acronyms we hear a lot thrown around is the MQL. So what, of course, what is an MQL? Well, of course, that's a marketing qualified lead. And depending on how far you go in that conversation, you could also have an SQL, which is a sales qualified lead. And I'll show you something in just a moment to see exactly how we can get marketing and sales a little more aligned within that discussion process. But how do we achieve marketing qualified leads? How do we do it? I don't want to oversimplify the process, but step one would be to reach agreement. And I appreciate that reaching agreement can take quite a bit of time and some fairly robust conversation. But it's really critical that there actually be conversation and that there be agreement. If marketing are sitting in their ivory tower, making the decisions as to what constitutes a marketing qualified lead, we're already setting ourselves up for failure. So we really need to make sure that we engage with the sales team to ensure that there's agreement on what it is that they need, what's the data and the information they need against a particular lead in order for them to see that as a marketing qualified lead. And then the second step, of course, is to design and build campaigns to drive engagement. And this is obviously a fairly big piece of the pie. This is what we're doing every day. It's understanding a content strategy. It's understanding an overall communication strategy. Was it Stephen Covey, I think, used to say, begin with the end in mind, one of his 7 habits. So if we begin with the end in mind, if the end is to deliver marketing qualified leads, we need to spend time thinking through what it takes in order for us to get to that particular point. And that in many cases becomes a numbers game, as in you need to have X numbers of people you're talking with in order to shrink that down to a group that would come through to the system as a marketing qualified lead. But there are many processes involved in building lead campaigns. And sometimes we just throw the term around lead nurturing. But I suggest to you that there's a little bit more to it, and by having a little bit more of a focus and a little bit more detail, we can potentially break our campaigns up a little bit further and become a little bit more granular in the way that we think about the lead processes. So we could argue that lead generation is potentially at the very beginning. And so all of this belongs, if we look at the traditional sales funnel, and where we see marketing typically at the very top of that funnel, that these activities would sit again at the very top of that particular funnel. So we would begin with lead generation, and it could be out on social, it could be via the website, there could be a whole range of different ways that you're generating leads. It could be face-to-face events, maybe trade shows that your organization might attend, professional seminars, series, etc., where there are opportunities to meet people. And so that's the online and the offline world coming together to generate leads. Once we have those leads and we understand a little bit about them, that they're a little bit more than just an email address, so at least we have names and we might have their company name, and from that we can infer their industry and potentially some of their high-level needs, then we can start to think about nurturing campaigns and dropping those people into relevant nurturing campaigns as they go through. Now, at some point, that nurturing campaign should hopefully lead to an assignment of some sort, and that assignment typically lives within the CRM. So the CRM is usually where leads are assigned once they're received by the sales team. And then, of course, there'll be processes along the way where opportunity management kicks in, etc. And not all of those leads will close. We know that's just the nature of the beast, but the worst thing we can do is have those leads just simply fall out of the funnel and disappear, and potentially end up in the bottom of the barrel. So if there's recycling campaigns that can be considered, then there's certainly an advantage in doing that. And the more you know about the person, and certainly if you're at the stage where they've been through an opportunity management process, then you will absolutely be able to recycle them potentially with some relevant information. So let's have a closer look at what that might look like. So the notion of a marketing qualified lead would go from lead nurturing to lead assignment. And so it's right there between steps 2 and 3 that we would literally potentially go from Eloqua into the CRM. Now you could use lead scoring to be the criteria to get that lead from Eloqua into the CRM, or you may have specific forms that regardless of a lead score, if a person submits a particular form as part of a particular campaign, they may get pushed directly into the lead object of your CRM system. And this is where I'd introduce to you the SQL construct. So the notion or the idea of an SQL is a sales qualified lead. And then there are some that apply another acronym. I don't really like acronyms, but another acronym, which would be an SAL, which is a sales accepted lead. So the notion of a sales accepted lead is that it would fall somewhere right here in between the two. That first of all, sales need to accept it. Now, from a data point of view, what I mean by accept is that it's arrived in the CRM, it's sitting there in the lead object, but that's it. Nothing else has happened. Once it's actually assigned to a particular individual, that becomes a sales accepted lead. Because what marketing are often most anxious to understand is, that's great, we've put the lead through into the CRM system, but it sat there for 3.5 weeks before anybody looked at it. So that to me is a lead that has not been accepted by sales. We're not saying they have to qualify it, but they just simply have to accept it, receive it, and digest it, and begin the process of doing something with it. So that sales accepted lead is something that can be a helpful measurement to gauge and understand how quickly the sales team are at least acknowledging that the lead has come in. They've had a quick look at it, and they're like, yes, okay, I'll start having a conversation with that person. And then once it's a qualified lead, then it moves into the opportunity management process, typically within most organizations, certainly from a B2B point of view. So any questions or comments on that lead process? Do you have a lead process or management process within the business that looks something like this, where there's leads being generated, obviously through the marketing team, which are then being presented to the sales team? Do you have any level of transparency? Are you able to see how quickly the sales team accept that and what happens? Does the CRM provide you with that information? Okay, so one of our attendees today says, yes, we do. We use the lead model and then pass those on to telesales. So the telesales team make that happen for them. Somebody then says it's a work in progress. This is fantastic. So sales then feeds them back to marketing. So I assume that would cover off the recycling point that we've talked about there as well. So if the lead should not convert or should not progress, that we do then look at some level of recycling to bring that lead back into marketing, so marketing can then continue to nurture it. So that's very cool. Okay, so this follows on very tightly with our previous topic, but just gives you a little bit of a structure to potentially think about in relation to that whole process. So we need a plan to engage cold and retired leads in the CRM. So the first challenge for many organizations is identifying, well, how do I tell that a lead or a contact sitting in Eloqua is in fact cold or retired? How do I do that? So once we understand that, we can then get a bit of a grasp as to the potential size of that audience. And once we understand the size of the audience, we can then begin to develop and think about some strategies as to how we would actually engage with them. So many of you will have access to, within the CRM, an opportunity process. And it's generally referred to as a lead and opportunity process. Some companies choose just to use opportunities. That's fine as well. But most CRMs are configured to provide you with a lead object and then also an opportunity object. And so what you've got here essentially are some stages of a particular sale. And so if we look at a lead flowing right through to an opportunity, a lead at its very basic, it could be something as simple as at least having a name. That, for instance, it can't even be put into the system unless there's a name. Now, in the world of digital marketing, like all of us, we obviously want an email address as well. So you might add email address here. And so what you could do is actually list under each of these different parts of the process, what are the attributes that make up the name. So it could be their first name, their last name, their email address, and their company name. That may be the bare minimum in order for it to be in the system. Certainly it needs to have an email address, obviously, in order for it to travel through into Eloqua. Then we can start to look at interests identified. We can look at understanding if they meet the ideal client profile criteria. So as an organization, has there been time spent to sit down and really understand what an ideal client looks like in your world? That can be really helpful for the marketing team because it can help drive the types of questions that you would ask on forms, for instance. You could use progressive profiling, so you're always asking the right sort of questions in hope that you're getting the right responses, which will in turn beef up the information you have to develop an ideal client profile. And so then there'll be a whole set of rules in place, but at some point you will develop a marketing qualified lead. Now, the other thing that we need to factor in here sometimes is duration and time. So how long does it take typically to move from simply a name to interests identified, to meeting the ideal client profile, to in turn then becoming a marketing qualified lead? It could be that this first step takes 3 or 4 months. The interests identified might take 2 months on average, etc. Meeting the ideal client profile could take another 3 months. It really could depend on your business. But the thing is, captured within the back of most of your CRM systems, this information is available. So typically within the lead object of the CRM and also within the opportunity object of the CRM, there is a drop-down menu. So when users are working on the opportunity object, and as they progress that particular sale and they move it from a sales accepted lead to a sales qualified lead to a solution agreement, etc., as they move along through those various areas, the system time and date stamps each of those in the back of the platform. And so as it does that, you're able to then create reports. And those reports, one of which we would refer to as a velocity report. And a velocity report basically helps you understand how quickly people are moving through here. So what's the average amount of time it takes for a sale to close in your industry or in your business? Now that information, as I said, generally in most cases will be stored and buried there in the back of your CRM system. That data just needs to be uncovered and turned into a report. So if we look at each of these various stages, for instance, now of course being marketers, we hope that everything moves through, but it doesn't always happen. But as you then start to move into the opportunity stage, people will drop out at different stages of the opportunity process. And so here, this is what we would call the recycling. So if we understand that at this particular point, this opportunity has been moved to a closed lost status, then it can drop out, but it can be picked up through recycling. And so the loss of that particular campaign could then actually move into a nurturing campaign automatically. Probably not straight away, that wouldn't be probably the greatest of ideas, but at least move them into some sort of a nurturing campaign. Now, when most CRM opportunities are closed lost, you can automatically require that the Salesforce or the CRM user assign a reason code. So why did we lose this particular sale? Was it because of competition? Was it strictly based on price? Did we not have the right functions or features of our product based on their needs, etc.? If you can identify what those average reasons are for why an opportunity could be lost, you could also then build nurturing campaigns or recycling campaigns to really address some of those concerns and those questions, which could be largely educational in nature. But the key thing there is that the CRM user has to tell you why, and don't provide them with a list of 25 different reasons. Probably best off sticking to maybe 5, 6, maximum 7 reasons, potentially as to why that a particular individual or that opportunity was lost. And so you'll see there'll be others that obviously fall through the cracks as well and are lost. But of course, the objective of the whole process is to have a lead come all the way through the process and then actually be won. So once you win that particular deal, well, then they become a customer, and that's a whole other part of the exercise. But it would be really helpful for the marketing team to be able to go back and really understand what this process looks like for the sales team. Because what you can do as marketers, once you understand that it takes on average 2 months to present a sales qualified lead before it can move into solution agreement, once you understand the averages here, you can then start to use Eloqua to support the sales team by automatically engaging. So if we're looking at an average of 2 months, for a sales qualified lead to take place, if a particular contact is sitting in an opportunity and it's now 2.5 months, so it's longer than the average, you could then look at introducing some automated or trigger-based campaigns to engage with that person based on the objections that you commonly see within that particular stage of the sale. You could tailor it quite aggressively, obviously, but I would encourage you to begin a little bit higher, sort of a 30,000-foot view, and then potentially start to get a little bit more granular as you move through. And of course, the communications that go out at that particular point could either be personalized from the particular salesperson. In this case, it would be the opportunity owner, for instance, or you may choose to make them a little bit more generic from the company as a whole. So it's a bit of a softer approach versus something potentially, straight from the salesperson. If you could rank maybe 5 being have a clear understanding through to 0 having no understanding, how would you rank your understanding of the sales process within your business? So how clear are you on the sales process that your sales team go through in order to manage their opportunity. So again, 5, I have a very clear understanding, through to 0 where I have sort of no understanding. Okay, so, okay, cool. We have a 4 from somebody. We have a 3. Okay, we're still mapping it. It varies between business units. Okay, that's a really good point. Depending on the size of the business, it could vary considerably through the business units. Okay, okay, someone's given themselves a 2, so maybe a little bit of work to be done there. The key thing, okay, I only knew, not a problem. Thanks, Rebecca. The key thing here is to make the time to understand the process. Once you understand the process that the sales team are going through and understand the typical objections that they have at these various stages, why is it they think they win deals versus why they think they lose deals, etc. Marketing can then start to look at that information and analyze it and look at ways to do some much smarter marketing in relation to some very personalized comms that could go out to particular people. Alrighty, so let's have a look at the last step. I think we're going to finish a little bit early today, guys, too, by the way. But what we'll do now is, so we need to look at more automation and less simple email campaigns. So the arrival of the simple email campaign function, which is probably over 12 months ago now, has been a good, and in some cases I think a bit of a bad thing. It's been a good thing because for those very, as the word says, simple emails where you really just need to get a message out the door, it's not part of a larger strategy, it's just a quick, immediate communication, then the simple email campaign process is great. It's very simple, very easy to do. The downside is that it also, I think, makes us a little bit lazy. I had a very exciting conversation at the face-to-face user group meeting last week with one of our clients. They've been using Eloqua for, I think, just over 12 months. And I asked this question, sort of, on average, how many campaigns are you doing and how many of those would be simple email campaigns versus those that would be multi-step campaigns? And she was telling me that her team have probably over the last 6 to 8 weeks have really started to make a transition to the multi-step campaigns. And there's been lots of benefits there. One is that she said they get so much more excited about what they're doing because they genuinely feel a sense of achievement that they've managed to put this campaign together. They can see the whole campaign in front of them. And she says, I'm often walk around the office and they'll say, hey, come have a look at this. Have a look at this campaign that I've done. It looks amazing. And so they're doing a lot of events and all sorts of other sort of nurturing style campaigns as well. But the flip side is that it also means that they're not having to come back to Eloqua every day. If you're sending out just a simple email here and a simple email there, you then, if you want to join any of the dots together, you then have to pull out a segment, work out who opened, who didn't, etc., then figure out the next step in relation to that campaign. So that's why the multi-step campaign just makes so much more sense, because it really takes advantage of the automation in the marketing automation that is Eloqua. So that's certainly a major difference in the process. But let's jump into Eloqua and just have a look. Okay, so the simple email campaign process, most of you will have used that, I'm sure. It is by its very nature simple. Of course, there's the A/B testing option that you've got there as well, uploading your various information. You can adjust the size of your audience or the testing audience there, for instance, select your winning metrics, etc. As you can see here, the nice part is ticking the box here, which ensures that the winning version is automatically sent to the balance. And so the balance is this group right here under winning version, etc., which is 70%. So that's a simple email campaign. But of course, it's the multi-step campaign where the magic really starts to happen. So one of the easiest examples of a multi-step campaign is this template, and we use this template quite a bit in relation to, well, actually not even for post-user group comms, they're a little bit different again. But this essentially is enabling you to automate or take advantage of the automation process, which is obviously dropping your audience into the canvas, We then have the contact washing machine built into this particular template, and this particular one, what it's doing is making sure that the person's first name, last name, etc. is in proper case. The nice thing is you can configure these pieces onto the campaign canvas, and when you save it as a template, the configuration remains. So I don't ever, excuse me, I don't ever have to come in to the contact washing machine on the template. It's already configured. I know what it's going to do, and so it's good to go. So this is, again, one of the most basic ways to send out your email. So in this case, the email is sent, etc. We might then wait for a period of time, and then we're checking to see who actually opened the email. And for those that didn't open the email, we can then send a repeat. So keeping in mind, remember that Eloqua won't let you send the same email to the same person twice. So what we do is we take this asset from the first one. You can use the edit function right here, but it'll open the email for you, and then do a save as. So you've now created two assets, two email assets. The only thing that would really differ on this second one would be to probably change the subject line and maybe also alternate the time of delivery on the day. So once your email is attached, you can then access the scheduling function here. Just tick the box. You just need to have an asset assigned. Let me show you. I'll just choose one. Once you select that, then you can then alternate exactly when you would want that particular information to be sent, like so. All right. Let's have a look at some other types of campaigns. So we have a template for nurturing that we can see right here. Let me just go to the top of the list. So the nurturing campaign, and I just call it a general nurturing campaign because it might be a lead nurture campaign. It could be an onboarding type welcome campaign, which basically from a process flow point of view follows pretty much the same direction as a nurturing campaign. And so what happens here is we would send out an introduction email, sort of outlining the campaign, etc., what it's about, what we're trying to share with people over the coming weeks and months, etc. And then basically the process just repeats and repeats and repeats. So we send out, we check to see if they opened the email. If they did, that's great. They move on to the second email. However, if they didn't open that first one, let's go ahead and touch them again. And then we wait for a period of time and then move them directly onto the second email, etc. So we want to respond to people based on their engagement or their lack of engagement, but we don't want to try and send them that particular email 25 times. You know, if it didn't work the first time, we try a second time, but hey, look, if it didn't open it the second time, that's fine. Let's just move on to the next part of the campaign and the next process. So this particular example is one that just, as I said, it just repeats and repeats and repeats as it goes down. You'll find it much easier when you build out these types of templates if you actually name the steps. So you can see here you've got the ability to call those whatever you want. And by naming each of the steps, it really does make it a lot easier and really helps you get everything configured the right way. So we, in this particular template, have elected to use the opened email step, but you may want, as you start to move through, so here we are with sort of the third email into the exercise, maybe we now start to look at increasing the threshold for engagement. You know, opening an email is a fairly soft engagement. It's pretty easy to do, essentially. So what I would do here maybe is adjust this one and I'd swap it out. So I can delete that one. And so now I'm sort of increasing the threshold for engagement. You know, did they click on the email? Now remember, if you want to get very specific about what they clicked on in the email, then you probably want to use the shared filter in order to do that. And so the shared filter would be in place of asking potentially did they click. So the question you would ask in the shared filter is, have they actually clicked on a very specific link within that particular email? If you're just looking at general overall engagement, certainly the clicked email step will work. But again, if you want to be very specific, you would need to create a shared filter in order to do that. And so that process just continues and continues. We actually take it up over to the other side of the page and or the canvas, and it continues again down that part of the page as well. All right, okay. So Michelle, question you had there, I can see that. In this example, you measure only opening with a question mark or interaction in general. So actually, that was great. I just answered that for you, so that's good. So yeah, so when I built out that template, I just literally put in the open steps all the way through because I found each campaign I did, it was going to be a little bit different. But in that example I just showed you there, you can see that I added the clicked, and you could add website and shared filters, all sorts of different things. How many emails are too many? Brody, I think the answer to that question probably relates more to the time involved. So if you have 12 emails or 12 key messages that you want to get across to people, if you only had a window of 2 or 3 weeks, I'd suggest that's probably too many emails. However, if that was a campaign that you were pushing out over maybe a 4-month period, 12 emails might be reasonable. I'm sure, like you, I subscribe to many different organizations, and some of them hit me on a daily basis. They'd never really asked me if I was interested in every day, but they come hard and thick and fast. So just think about your audience, I suppose, and try and understand them, and look at past performance of campaigns where maybe you've had campaigns that are run over a longer period of time with more emails, and get a general feel from your own data as to people's receptiveness to that. Is there an ideal cadence? That's a really good question. Sorry, I just went up the screen. Brody, is there an ideal cadence? Brody, I think happy to take this discussion with you offline, but and this is, I mean, it's relevant for everybody. It really depends, are we selling shoes and handbags? Are we selling prestige motor vehicles? Are we selling million-dollar properties? All of these things will differ for everybody, and the cadence, I think, is often determined by the buyer's process and the journey they're going through. So if somebody's looking to buy million-dollar properties, for instance, for most of us, that's not a decision we make within a 24-hour period. And so the cadence there could be something that is kind of stretched out a little bit, but you could also increase or decrease the cadence based on a person's engagement. If I go back to that particular campaign canvas, the cadence that I gave you in that particular example is actually driven largely by the person. So if we go to the top here, so we can see that the campaign starts, the first email goes out, we wait for 3 days, and again, the 3 days was just a placeholder, so please don't take that as gospel, as that 3 days is the right number. But you can see here, so people come through. Now, for those people that opened the first email, they will now immediately move on to the second email. However, those people that didn't open the email will send a reminder, and then what I've got is another wait period. So right here at the beginning of the process, the pack, as I like to call them, or the segment, the pack begins to break up. So those people who are engaging and who are opening or are clicking or downloading forms, etc., they will move through the campaign faster than those people that don't engage quite as aggressively. You can almost get to a point, for instance, where maybe after 3 emails, let's say we use the example of you've got 12 campaign or 12 communication points or 12 emails. Maybe once you've sent 3 emails, you do a check and you find out, has this person opened any of the previous communications? If they've not opened any of those previous communications, maybe email is not going to be the way to get the cut through. So could you then route those people off to a shared list, which is then shared with the call center or with the sales team or somebody within the organization to potentially make some outbound phone calls? Could that be a way? Is there really much point? If they haven't opened 1, 2, or 3, maybe we switch to a slightly different channel. If you've got integration with your LinkedIn, some of those new LinkedIn form capabilities, for instance, you could look at doing some targeting within those sorts of platforms, or Facebook, for instance. There'd be and that's where the multi-channel strategy starts to come into play. It's very easy for us to get buried in our Eloqua experience and think that it's the best option that we have. But a multi-channel strategy is the best option, and Eloqua is just one part of that exercise for you. Any practice in terms of mapping the content for each broadcast? Okay, so Positioned here as a basic question from Michelle. Basic question, any best practice in terms of mapping the content for each broadcast? The topics, right. There was some great work done by, I've forgotten the name of the agency. It was a US-based agency, and what they did is they looked at the sales process. So if we go back to that earlier slide that I had that had the opportunity process or the sales process, they looked at some of the best ways to present types of content. So from memory, what they were saying was things like video testimonials from customers about how wonderful your organization is. Those sorts of things are typically better towards the end of the sales cycle. So when people are starting to negotiate contracts and have questions about specific ways they're going to engage, that's where customer testimonials really come in handy. They reference that the idea of online calculators, for instance, is very early. And so you'll notice that a lot of the banks in Australia will give you online calculators either through your banking app or through their websites, all the financial services firms. And they're freely available. Some of them will put them behind a gate. You have to fill in some details to get to it if it's a slightly more complex type of calculator. But that would be considered something very early in the stage. Case studies, whether they be a PDF type example or even a video, for instance, is probably good there as people are in the early stages of the sale and they're exploring and evaluating and looking at different people. So the Content Marketing Institute is a good website for you to visit. So again, that's the Content Marketing Institute. They provide some excellent ideas around mapping content to your particular sales process or buyer's journey, so to speak. We also do a little bit of work with customers through a range of different workshops to help with that as well, which helps us just to first of all understand the sales process and the buyer's journey, and then looking at where the content can be best delivered in that process as well. So there's a few ways to help with that. Can you build alerts at each stage to identify when unsubscribe is greater than X, because obviously the campaign is not working to plan? Okay, so Brody says, thanks Misha. So can you build alerts at each stage to identify when unsubscribes are greater than X, because obviously the campaign is not working to plan? I would argue it may not be obvious, but that's okay. In relation to triggers for reports, Brody, I'm just trying to think quickly here. Brody, I think there's nothing that comes to mind that would automatically trigger, as in like a canned report that you can get out of Eloqua today, that would deliver that. But I'm thinking perhaps you could set up something in segments, but it wouldn't automatically notify you. You can send yourself a daily report. So if you have a large campaign in play with lots of different customers, you could send yourself a daily report, which would pop into your inbox, which would give you a visual. However, it would come in every day. So it wouldn't be triggered based purely on a threshold of unsubscribes. But let me take that offline. We'll capture all these notes, questions, etc., captured here electronically. So let me take that one offline and I'll come back to you if I've got a suggestion on that one. Wow, those questions were great. Thank you. We've now got 6 minutes to go. Just a couple of things I wanted to let you know about that I heard from the Oracle marketing team, the Oracle product marketing team, specifically in relation to Eloqua for a webinar I attended last week. Couple of things. Many of you will be familiar with the email click-through, the email click-through report. When you go into the email editor, over on the bottom right-hand corner of the menu, you'll see a click-through report. And so the click-through report is a visual representation of your email and showing you where people are actually clicking. This email actually is active, but it's only been sent to me so far. So, but you can see here it pops up and shows you that's me testing the links, etc., making sure everything's as it should be, etc. So it shows you all of that relevant information. The landing page version of this report should be available to us around October this year. So it's looking pretty good. I saw a portion of it. It looks pretty much exactly the same, but of course it's a website. So as a visual tool for your landing pages, that will be a pretty tremendous addition to understanding the effectiveness of your landing page design, etc. Another one that's coming, and out of all the things I talked about, I actually thought this one was super cool. I imagine it will probably go somewhere over here under your campaign settings, or potentially maybe under the actions menu. What you'll be able to do is when you set up a campaign that has a duration of maybe 3 or 5 months or even 12 months, you'll be able to set up an email reminder to yourself, either a week before it concludes, a month before it concludes, etc., just to let you know that that particular campaign will be wrapping up in a short period of time. It's very easy to forget that these campaigns are running, especially your sort of always-on campaigns like we talked about last month. If you have your always-on campaigns, you can sort of get a bit of a feel here when you look at the My Eloqua tab and look at the campaigns and active campaigns, etc. And we do have one that shows you completed this week, for instance. But there was no way to sort of be notified easily that a particular campaign was coming to an end, especially if it's a nurturing campaign, because a nurturing campaign you might have running for 12 months. And if you're on holidays, excuse me, at the end of that 12 months, or maybe you've even left the organization, this process will help keep everybody on the same page. So that was one thing that I was kind of excited about. Also, enhancements coming for those of you that are running Salesforce as a CRM and have that integrated with Eloqua. There's significant changes coming to the application, so the app that sits between Salesforce and Eloqua. So for those of you who are integrated, we know obviously who you are. We'll be in contact over the coming months. There's nothing that needs to happen anytime soon. It's sort of the first part of next year, but we'll certainly want to start the conversation to make sure that we have everything organized for that transition for that app when that happens, because the current app will be retired. They haven't given us a date yet, but it typically probably is like 12, 18 months away. So again, nothing to rush, but there are some distinct advantages with the new app around speed especially, so that will be good news for everybody as well. But were there any other questions at all based on anything we've talked about there today? Okay, if there are no other questions, we will wrap up. Okay, so we've been through our extensive Q&A, so thank you very much. So the session has been recorded, as you know, and will be available to you hopefully within the next 7 days. You can find them on our YouTube channel. There's a link to our YouTube channel at the bottom of our website. You'll see the social buttons there. You can go to the YouTube channel, but of course we'll email you a link as well so you can access that information. But thanks everybody, really appreciate your time. Thank you for making some time to join us, and thank you very much for your questions. Much greatly appreciated. Have a great week, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.